the chain that broke his spirit. Welcome, dear listener. You've just entered a small and quiet world. A world where stories of forgotten souls find their way into light. This is Diary of Abandoned Souls. I'm grateful you're here. My name is Adrijana, and I'm a groomer. But more than that, I'm a witness. Each dog we rescue carries a silent book inside its eyes. And every bath, every gentle trim, opens up the chapters. What you're about to hear is not fiction. It's stitched together from real moments, shared in soft whispers and quiet glances in our salon. Sometimes, between the snips of scissors and the hum of the dryer, they tell us everything. Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone. He didn't bark much. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't even know how to be a dog anymore. His story doesn't begin with joy. It begins with a chain. There are places in this world where silence isn't peace. It's punishment. And he lived in one of those places. No name, no bed, no sky above his head, just a rusted tin roof and the clink of a metal collar. Day after day, season after season, his paws pressed into the same dry patch of earth. He circled until grass forgot how to grow, and nobody noticed.
Except for us.
Eventually, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you to the place where it all began. To the sound of a chain that whispered, "You are not free." He was kept behind the barn, far enough so his cries wouldn't reach the house, but not far enough to escape the scent of warm bread he was never offered. He had water when it rained. He had food sometimes. But most of all, he had time. Time to forget what love felt like. Time to watch birds without ever being able to chase them. Time to smell the seasons, but never touch them. Dogs are creatures of presence, but he lived in absence. Absence of touch, of praise, of freedom. And slowly, day by day, something inside him dimmed. He stopped looking up. He stopped pulling at the chain. Because after a while, you stopped believing you were ever meant to be free. They called him dog, not a name, just a label like shovel, or gate, or tree. But a soul without a name is a soul waiting to be claimed. And that is where we come in. In the next part of this story, you'll hear what happened the day it all changed. The moment the chain rusted, not just from rain, but from time running out. But for now, if your heart feels heavy, let it. That's how you know you're still human. Thank you for listening. We'll meet again soon. And when we do, you'll hear the first sound that cracked the silence. The beginning of his beginning. There was no single moment when he was truly abandoned, not like in the movies. No spinning tires, no slamming doors, no echo of footsteps walking away. His abandonment was slow, a fading, a long, quiet erasure. It began when he was just a pup, too big for the couch, too loud for a baby trying to nap, too clumsy for inside. So they moved him outside, first to the porch, then to the yard, then behind the shed. And finally, at first, he barked to the chain. He barked with joy when they came outside. He barked with excitement at the sound of the children laughing. He barked with longing when he heard the clatter of forks and plates through the kitchen window. They told him to stop, but eventually, shut up, stupid mutt. Why do you always bark? And so he did. He learned to go quiet, to curl into the same corner of dirt when the sun scorched the earth, to press his back against the shed wall when the rain poured through the slits in the roof. In plain sight, to disappear, the chain clung to his neck like a forgotten promise. It wasn't just metal, it was the weight of being unwanted. At first, he fought it. He'd tug and twist and pull until his skin chafed raw. But the chain never gave, and neither did the silence of those who put it there. They fed him when they remembered, watered him when it was convenient, spoke to him only to say move or stop, or shut up. And even then, he wagged his tail, because love doesn't understand cruelty. Not at first, still hoping. He was still just a dog. Until one day, still trusting, he stopped hoping to. It was autumn when it happened. The trees wore their sorrow in colors: rust, copper, blood orange, and the air was colder than usual. A warning, a whisper from the coming frost. He had no shelter, just a piece of tarp held down with bricks. When the wind came, it flapped like a dying bird. He didn't bark anymore, didn't try to catch the leaves that tumbled past him, didn't whimper. He just stared. Ahead, beyond the fence, as if maybe somewhere out there was a world that didn't hurt. That week, no one brought food. Not once. The kids were busy with school. The adults, too tired, too distracted. He chewed on roots, too used to pretending he wasn't there, licked morning dew from his own paws, and still waited, even when it shouldn't. Because that's what love does. It waits. On the third night, the cold bit through his fur. He trembled, curled into himself like a leaf folding under frost. And as he lay there, watching his breath rise in soft clouds, he knew, not just outside the house, he knew he had been left, but outside of love. That was the night his name disappeared. Not because they took it, but because no one had said it in so long. It lost its shape. Even in his own mind, he had a name once. But now, a silly one, given by a laughing child with jam on her fingers. Even she had forgotten, and so had he. What was he now? A body chained to silence. The next morning, a dog-shaped shadow. He didn't get up right away. There's a stillness that settles into the bones when you've waited too long. Not the peaceful kind, the other kind. The kind that hollows you out from the inside, like termites beneath painted wood. That's what lived in him now. Not life, not death. Something in between. He no longer counted the days. He didn't know what day it was. If you asked him, he wouldn't even remember what the sun felt like. His world had narrowed down to a circle of dirt, a rusted water bowl, a shadow that came and went depending on the time of day. A loop, endless and unkind. Inside him there were echoes. Echoes of a girl's laughter, of a ball thrown once, long ago before it was forgotten behind the shed. Of a name, half remembered, like a dream you wake from too quickly. He didn't bark at birds anymore, didn't chase his tail, didn't wag when someone walked by. Because they never came for him. They came to take out the trash, to stack firewood, to yell at each other across the yard, but not for him. The chain had worn a groove into his neck, not deep, but permanent. Even if you removed it, you'd still see the mark. Still feel it in the way he walked, shoulders low, head down, as if apologizing for simply existing. In the long stretches of daylight, he learned how to disappear, not physically. He couldn't do that, but internally, he'd close his eyes, curl up tight, and retreat to a place where memory still held warmth. In that place, a little boy with curly hair had once kissed his nose. A woman had once said, "Good boy," and meant it. And he had run freely, joyfully, through grass that tickled his belly. But those memories faded too, because when you are never touched, you forget how it feels. He dreamed sometimes of smells, of running, of sound, clear, joyful, alive. But when he woke, there was only dirt and the chain, always the chain. One day, he stopped dreaming. His body no longer hoped while sleeping. Even the mind gives up when there's nothing left to grasp. So he simply sat, or laid, or stared at a crack in the wall where spiders lived. Even they had more freedom than him. And yet, there was a tiny ember inside him, something he couldn't name. A flicker, maybe not of hope, but of not quite giving up. That's what made him lift his head that day. The day the wind brought a new scent. A soft rustling on the gravel path. A footstep, gentle, purposeful, and a voice, low, female, not shouting, just calling out softly to no one in particular. He didn't get up, didn't move, but his ears twitched. A signal. The body remembers what the soul almost forgot. She appeared like a ghost between the trees, coat too thin for the cold, hair pulled into a bun, eyes scanning, not for something, but someone. When her gaze met his, he froze. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. She saw him, not the way others did, not with pity, not with indifference, but with something soft, something that made his chest ache. Recognition. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, as if unsure whether he was real, or whether she was dreaming. He looked away. He didn't want to scare her, didn't want to hope, but his tail gave a twitch, barely, like a breath. And she stepped closer. He didn't run. He couldn't. But even if he could, something about her made staying feel less dangerous than fleeing. She crouched, slowly, carefully, no sudden movements, no calling or clapping, just silence and a kindness so loud it filled the air. And he tilted his head. Not much, just enough to say, "Are you here for me?" She reached into her coat, pulled out a crumpled piece of bread, held it out. He didn't move. He just watched as she placed it on the ground between them and slid it gently across the dirt. No rush, no command, just invitation. That moment, between offer and acceptance, lasted longer than it should have, because hunger doesn't just live in the belly, it lives in the heart. And he had been starving for years. When he finally moved, it was slow, unsure, like touching something sacred. He took a step, then another. The chain tugged, and for the first time in years, he heard her gasp, a real sound, from a real heart, responding to a real wound. She didn't cry, not yet, but something changed in her eyes, like the shift before a storm, a soft, inevitable cracking. She looked at the chain, then at him, and he looked at her. And for just a second, one precious second, he believed that maybe this wasn't the end of waiting. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of being found. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but no one had looked into his eyes in years. Not really. Not past the dirt. Not past the sadness. Not past the silence that had settled behind them like dust in an abandoned room. Until now, she didn't know his story. Not the whole of it. Not the years spent waiting for a door to open that never did. Not the nights so cold he tucked his nose into his chest and prayed for sleep to come quickly. But she felt it, in the way he stood, as if any kindness might shatter him. She had been told there was a dog tied behind the shed, neglected, barely alive. But she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him. He wasn't beautiful, not in the way magazines show dogs. His coat was patchy, fur matted in places, rubbed bare in others. His ribs whispered under skin too thin. And his eyes, they didn't shine. They dulled under weight too heavy for a creature who had only wanted to belong. But when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't a plea, not even a question. It was quieter than that. A breath, a flicker, a whisper through rusted chains. "Do you really see me?" She took a step closer. He didn't move, not away, not forward, just stood, as if caught between caution and craving. The chain clinked gently, not from movement, but from memory. She knelt. The dry grass crackled under her knees. He flinched. Only slightly, but she saw it. Saw how even gentleness startled him, as if he'd forgotten it was possible. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a breath. "Hi, that's all. No cutesy baby talk, no promises, just presence." It was enough. He lowered his head, Not in submission, not in fear, but in a kind of offering. Like a flower drooping toward water, she held out her hand, open, still, letting him decide. Letting him be the one to choose, maybe for the first time in his life. He sniffed, hesitantly, barely, and then, as if something ancient inside him remembered what trust felt like, he took one step forward. The chain held him back. Of course it did. It always had. But his eyes, they leaned closer. That's when she saw it. A flicker, tiny, almost nothing, but there. A spark, buried under layers of hurt and hunger, still flickering, still waiting for oxygen, for love. She whispered again, "I see you." And she meant it. Every syllable pressed gently against the silence that had wrapped around him for too long. And somehow, he heard her, not just with his ears, but with every bruised and tired part of his being. He stepped forward again. The chain clanked, and she reached, fingers trembling, a heart open. And for the first time in what felt like forever, someone touched him without taking anything away. He closed his eyes. The contact was brief, but it was enough to open a door that had rusted shut from years of no one knocking. She looked at the chain, and then at him, back and forth, and the quiet between them grew heavy. A choice was forming, a possibility. "Not today," she whispered, "but soon." And he, with more understanding than any human might believe, let out a slow, shaky sigh. He believed her. Somehow, he believed her. They stayed like that a little longer, the sun dipping just slightly behind the trees, the cold settling in the shadows. And when she stood up, he didn't whimper, didn't cry. He simply watched, followed her with his eyes, until the trees swallowed her shape. For the first time in years, he didn't feel left. He felt noticed, marked, promised. And when the stars came out that night, he lifted his head just slightly higher, as if searching for her light in their reflection. That night, something stirred inside him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden, but it was there. A tremble in his chest, a flicker beneath his ribs. Like the moment a match strikes, not yet flame, but not darkness either. He lay curled on his patch of earth, his head resting on forepaws that had long since stopped anticipating affection. But his eyes stayed open, watching, waiting, remembering. The way her voice had sounded, soft as if talking to something sacred. The way her hand had hovered, not to command, but to invite. The way she had seen him, not as a burden, but as someone worth stopping for. And that did something to him. There was no tail wagging, no barking or leaping or joyful howl, only stillness. And inside it, a glow, a private miracle. It wasn't hope, not quite. Hope felt too dangerous still. But it was the beginning of wanting to hope. And that was everything. The next morning, he rose differently. Same dirt, same chain, same dry bowl, but he stood taller. His spine less curled, his head tilted toward the sound of birds in the trees. Not to chase them, but to remember what it meant to look up. When a squirrel ran past the edge of the fence, he watched it, really watched. Not with hunger, not with envy, but with curiosity, as if the world beyond his circle might finally include him again. Later that day, the boy came, one of the children from the house. He was dragging a stick, drawing lines in the mud, not looking for the dog at all, but the dog looked at him. For the first time in months, he lifted his head before a human had spoken. The boy glanced his way, paused. There was something different in the dog's eyes now, less dull, less distant, a faint shimmer, like a coin at the bottom of a dirty fountain. You had to lean in to see it, but it was there. The boy hesitated, then walked over. "Hey," he said, unsure. The dog didn't flinch, didn't cower. He just stared, his gaze steady, silent, waiting. The boy tossed him a crust of bread, a reflex, not kindness, not cruelty, just motion. And when the dog took it, he didn't swallow it whole like before. He chewed, slowly, purposefully, like he knew this was the beginning of a different kind of nourishment. Over the next few days, the world didn't change, but he did. The chain still held, the dirt still hardened beneath him, but his eyes, they started to reflect light again. Not just the sun, but memory. Memory of being seen, of being called someone. And every evening, he would watch the path. The same path she had walked, the one that led to the gate. He didn't whimper, didn't bark, but his ears would lift. Just slightly at the same time each night, because something inside him had begun to expect again. Expectation is dangerous when you've known only disappointment, but it's also brave. It means the soul is healing. It means the light is returning. He began to dream again, short dreams, soft ones, not of running, not yet, but of warmth, of quiet voices, of fingers brushing through tangled fur without anger. And in the waking hours, his eyes told the story. A story not of joy, not of freedom, not yet, but of recognition, of reflection, of a light inside that had refused to fully go out. One morning, when the wind blew softer and the frost had not yet bitten the air, he saw her again, at a distance, by the fence. She didn't come near, just stood, hands in pockets, watching. And he stood too. Not rushed, not trembling, just present, eyes fixed, ears lifted. And the tiniest, most fragile thing happened. He wagged his tail, once, barely. But in that moment, the world changed. The moment before touch is sometimes more powerful than touch itself. It's the moment where fear holds its breath. In love, waits patiently at the edge of permission. She came at dawn this time, before the others in the house had stirred, before the cold had settled into the soil, before anything could say, not now. She came for him. He was already standing, not because he heard her, but because he felt her, like a scent carried on memory, like a vibration beneath the earth that only those who've known silence can recognize. She moved slowly, no words, just breath and steps and presence. And he didn't move, but he didn't retreat either. There was no cowering, no shaking, only watching, waiting. She knelt in front of him again, this time closer, her knees pressed into the cold earth, as if to say, I am here to meet you where you are. She opened her hand, no food, no treat, just skin, warm, offered, empty, a sacred gesture. He lowered his head, not from fear, from listening. He was reading her now. Every twitch, every breath, every heartbeat became part of the language he had never forgotten. Her fingers moved slowly, like a breeze through tall grass. And then they touched his cheek, not firmly, not possessively, just a presence pressing softly into fur. He closed his eyes and exhaled, so long, so deep, that the earth itself might have listened. Because that breath wasn't just air, it was surrender. Surrender, not to her, but to trust, to the idea that not all hands are for hitting, that not all nearness ends in pain, that maybe, just maybe, he was safe now. She whispered something. He didn't need to understand the words. The tone was enough. It wrapped around him like a blanket woven from all the things he'd missed. Gentleness, warmth, belonging. Her other hand reached for the chain. And here was the moment where two hearts collided. She held the rusted link in her palm. Her thumb brushed over it, feeling every scar time had left, not just on the metal, but on him. She didn't tug, didn't remove it yet, just touched it, honored it, as if saying, I see what you've carried, and soon you won't carry it alone. He leaned forward, a centimeter, maybe less, but it was everything. He let his head rest, just lightly against her wrist, and she gasped, not in fear, but in awe. Because when a soul so broken still chooses to lean into love, it's a miracle, a quiet, ordinary, breathtaking miracle. She began to cry, not loudly, not the kind of tears that beg for comfort. These were silent, sacred, like prayers whispered into the fur of a forgotten dog as dawn rose behind them. He didn't lick her, didn't nuzzle. He simply stayed, connected, still, letting her sorrow and his history rest together in that fragile moment. And in her tears, he was not afraid, he understood, because he had cried like that too, just on the inside. For years, the chain shifted slightly as she adjusted her grip, not to pull, but to see if he'd flinch, but he didn't. Not this time, because now her hand meant warmth, her voice meant safety, her presence meant something sacred had returned to him, choice. And in that choice, he stood still, not frozen, not afraid, just ready. She reached into her coat and pulled out something small, a cloth collar, soft, faded blue, smelling faintly of lavender and laundry detergent, a contrast to the rusted chain that had owned him. She didn't put it on him, not yet. She just held it out and whispered, almost too softly to hear,
This is yours.
if you want it. He stared. Then, as if his body remembered the rhythm of choice, he leaned forward and touched his nose to the fabric. And in that moment, the chain didn't fall away, but something far heavier did. Fear. The chain didn't fall with a clang. It fell with a whisper, as if even it knew. This was not a moment for noise. This was sacred. She came back the next morning, not with pity. She came with a key, not with rescue painted on her lips. Not just for the padlock, but for him. He was already waiting, watching the gate, sitting. When she entered the yard, didn't bark. He didn't run. He simply stood, as if something in his chest had grown roots overnight and was now strong enough to carry hope. She walked to him without hesitation, as if the invisible thread between them had grown taut, pulling them closer with every heartbeat. There was no ceremony, no audience, just two beings, one human and one dog, and a more that decided to bear witness. She crouched, touched the chain. His body tensed. Old reflexes are stubborn, but her hand didn't hurt. It freed. The lock clicked. The chain slipped from his neck, and for the first time in who knows how long, he stepped back, and the world didn't follow him. He was untethered. He didn't run, didn't bolt. Freedom, for a soul that has forgotten itself, is not loud. It's quiet, timid, sacred. She stood, reached into her pocket, pulled out the soft blue collar. This time, he didn't hesitate. Pressed his head against her chest. He stepped forward. Thank you for being here. At Diary of Abandoned Souls, every dog in these stories was once invisible until someone like you cared enough to listen. I'm a groomer, and every story we tell here comes from dogs we've met, held, bathed, and loved through our rescue work and grooming salon. River was real. His pain was real. And so is his healing. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel. It means the world to us. In the description, you'll find a link to our second channel, where we share transformations through grooming. Because sometimes healing begins with something as small as a brush and as deep as being seen. And to every soul who has ever felt forgotten, may you one day find a door that opens softly and a voice that says, "Welcome home."